What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host, Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. Not only will you get a free $15 whenever you sign up, additionally, you'll be supporting the channel. You can also become a patron. Not only will you get to vote weekly on a deck tech for me to cover, additionally, you'll be supporting the channel. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsome, you rock. Now, let's get into today's video. And I was looking at these Vault Mythics and I came across, hey, some of these are not that expensive and very impactful. So today we're going to be talking about some of those very impactful mythics and what you should probably be spending your money on instead of buying a collector booster box. Now, notably, this is not financial advice. You should only be picking up these cards if you want to use them in your deck, but there are some very good cards in this set that you will want to pick up. So without further ado, I did want to start out by saying I went ahead and looked at every mythic from the Vault set or the Vault mini set, and it'll net you, or it'll cost you about $190. A collector booster box is $220. So you can literally buy every mythic from the Vault set for less than a booster box or a collector booster box. That was kind of insane to me, so I figured I'd just throw that out there. Now, notably, you're not going to get to open all the packs. You're not going to get any of the shiny mythics. So I'm just talking about the base mythic version. You could buy every single one and it'll cost you less than a booster box. So that's kind of insane, but let's get into the very cheap cards that we can pick up right now and shove in our decks and then be very impactful. And then later on in the video, we're going to talk about the chase cards that are a little more expensive, but still very fun to play with. Let's talk about Collector's Cage. Now, the hideaway mechanic in general, I think, is pretty underrated, and it's not going to be hard to get 3 different powers to cast that card for free. Additionally, in your counter decks, having a way to put counters on your creatures can be very impactful, because 9 times out of 10, the counter is going to do a lot more than just put a counter on a creature. We're probably putting more than one counter on the creature since there's a lot of counter doublers. I just think this is a very useful early drop that you should be looking at if you are playing a counter strategy. Moving on, we have Eccentric Duplicator. Now, this is really good in those strategies that want to sacrifice artifacts. I'm specifically looking at Wormcoil Engine effects here. That way we can sacrifice our Wormcoil Engine, pay 2 mana for another Wormcoil Engine, and just start an insane loop of getting a ton of Wormcoil Engines and those worms with the Death Touch and the Lifelink. I'm kind of obsessed with that card and just creating a pretty big board state with it. So as soon as I saw this, I was like, yep, we're just going to try to make as many Wormcoil tokens as possible. So whenever a card makes that viable, I'm going to mention it. Additionally, there's just a ton of value here. There's a lot of things we can loop in and out of the graveyard, like a Brass's Tunnel Grinder. You can sacrifice it with a Goblin Welder to bring back something like an Ever-Flowing Well. There's a lot of value to be had with this card, so definitely be looking at it for your decks that are focused on sacrificing artifacts and getting a lot of value by looping them in and out of the graveyard. Definitely going to be part of that insane value engine that already exists. Now, Memory Vessel, I'm probably only looking at this in decks that want to specifically be casting spells for exile or mono red decks. The fact that we can draw 7 cards in a mono red deck, especially an aggro mono red deck, is going to be very impactful. It can also be a little bit of hand disruption for our opponents as well, causing them to not be able to do their game plan, and they do not get access to those cards until this effect goes away. So it's really going to screw them up. But another thing you can do with this is with a Dranith Magistrate effect or effects that lock people out of casting spells from anywhere other than their hand. This is just going to shut that completely down and make it to where they are dead in the water. So kind of not very nice, but it's something you can do with this card. But honestly, I'm probably running this in your mono red aggro decks and those decks that don't have a lot of card advantage for them. Loot, he's just very, very cheap, and he's going to be a very impactful commander. So I thought I'd throw him on the list while he's cheap. He's probably going to maintain this price, but honestly, I'm just kind of in love with this commander. Value engine in the command zone. What could go wrong, right? Altech Matter Weaver. Now, I did want to talk about this guy because he's going to be very good in those creature strategies that also have access to treasure tokens, right? So if you're trying to generate a board state and you also have treasure tokens, it's going to kind of make it to where whenever you cast a creature spell, you get a treasure token instantly. And this can kind of create a scenario where you can storm off in a mono white deck or a white deck that doesn't have green in it with creatures. So definitely be looking at this guy. He's going to have a lot of niche scenarios where he's very good. And at his base, he is going to nets you an artifact token, so he's even not useless without having any other token to copy. Definitely keep your eye out on this guy. I'm probably going to pick him up to throw in a couple decks here and there. And again, he's going to be very useful in those white decks that want to play a lot of creatures but don't have access to green. Another card I wanted to look at, and I do think this one will go up in price, again, not financial advice, but just get them if you want to put them in a deck, is for Myy Vault. Now, on its base, it's a land that taps for colorless. Not terrible. And then additionally, it has that broken discard ability that lets you throw something in the graveyard. On its base, putting a discard effect on a land is pretty powerful because there's a lot of decks that want specific cards in the graveyard. And then on top of that, you get to look X cards deep, where X is the amount of artifacts you have on the battlefield, and put one of those into your hand. Now, late game, not exaggerating, this could dig you like 5 cards deep if you have a really dedicated artifact strategy. Even in CEDH, I could see this seeing some play because 1, treasure tokens, very prevalent. 2, you're playing a lot of cheap artifacts. You're playing your mana crypts, your soul rings. You're playing all that artifact ramp. I could see this card putting in some work and finding you your key pieces very fast while also helping out your game plan. Definitely keep your eye on this deck or this card in general and pick it up if you have an artifact based strategy that you want to try this out in, or if you're going to try it out in CEDH like I am. Now, let's talk about some of the more pricier cards in this list. We have Lost Jit. Now, something that this carried on from its previous card is the fact that it triggers on combat damage, not triggering off of dealing combat damage to a player. So even if a creature blocks another creature, you're going to get the trigger. And what are those triggers? You get to untap target land, target creature can't block this turn, or you get to put a 1/1 counter on equipped creature by removing a charge counter. That's another thing that's very notable on this card. It gets charge counters. So any deck that's going to add additional charge counters or cares about adding additional counters to things, this will go ahead and be very useful there. And then it is just very toolboxy. You get to untap lands, you get to make your creature bigger, you get to prevent a creature from blocking. I could see this being very useful in your Voltron strategies, or again in decks where you're doubling up on counters, because you can just throw a lot of counters on this and make some pretty big creatures. I mean, especially since you can double up on that 1/1 counter. So in a scenario where you have something that doubles counters on the battlefield, you get 2 charge counters, then you remove both of those charge counters to put 4 counters on your creature. That's probably the best scenario where you're using this deck. Moving on, we have Lotus Ring. Now, this is very good because 1, it's indestructible. Your opponents aren't going to be able to get rid of it. The +3 is whatever, the vigilance is whatever, but sacrifice this creature, add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool is very good. Now, it looks like it gets balanced because of the equip cost is 3, but we're going to be cheating that equip cost. I want to be playing this in decks where we're generating a lot of treasure tokens and we are playing cards that have free equip abilities. So something like a Kellen that wants to go wide, but it also likes equipment, I could see us playing this card there. And even then, just having the ability to sacrifice a creature to generate 3 mana is very powerful. The thing that I think we need in this deck, or decks that run this, is the ability to have haste, because it does give sacrifice this creature, or does give the ability to tap and sacrifice it to the creature. So if you generate the creature token and then equip this, you will have to wait a turn because of the summoning sickness. Just something to think about, but I could see this deck being very good and a lot of niche decks that want it, so definitely keep your eye out for that. There's one other card I wanted to talk about real quick, and this one's rather cheap as well. It's Nexus of Becoming. Anytime I see a high CMC artifact that draws me a card, I instantly think of colorless decks. And then additionally, you do get the ability to exile a card from your hand and create a 3/3 Golem artifact token copy of it. So this is very powerful because, again, in colorless decks, we're usually playing very expensive swingy cards. So this is going to be perfect here. It gives us card advantage, which colorless decks lack. It gives us the ability to exile our very expensive card and turn it into a 3/3 Golem. Let's say Portal to Phyrexia gets exiled. Now we have a 3/3 Golem Portal to Phyrexia. We're completely fine with that. So definitely be thinking about this when you're thinking about your colorless commanders that are playing a ton of high cost CMC artifacts. I think you could definitely shove this in here and it do some work. Now let's talk about the more expensive cards in this little side set we have. We have Simulacrum Synthesizer. Now this is going to allow you to generate a massive army of colorless constructs, which people have been wanting to do for a while, and I think that's what really drives this price, because honestly, I don't think it's that good. The fact that the artifact has to have CMC3 really kind of not nerfs this card, but makes it very fair. Now we're at least spending 3 CMC, or we're reanimating something with 3 CMC to trigger this. So that's going to hurt the abusability a little bit, but even still, with your Goblin Welder effects, this can be incredibly abusable, where you're sacrificing and reanimating 3 CMC like Brass's Tunnel Grinder and again Everflowing Well. Those are my 2 favorite things to reanimate with Goblin Engineer. So this is definitely going to be very good in decks where you're trying to generate a value engine based on 3 CMC artifacts. So this is going to see a good amount of play. Another thing that this does in your Goblin Engineer decks is we can actually tutor for this and then grab all our other pieces for the Goblin Engineer as well. So I think this is going to be a very fun card to play with and very good in the decks that want it, but I think the price is driven up by just the fact that people want to create as many artifact constructs as possible, and that hasn't really been viable in the past. So this is the card that does it, and people are excited to play with it, and that's probably what's driving the price right now. Now moving on, Sword of Wealth and Power. Now honestly, the protection from this is insane. Protection from instant and sorceries, that's going to get rid of the majority of your opponent's spot removal, so that's what's driving the price there. And then doubling up on your sorcery and instant spells and generating you a treasure token, that's just very good value here. This card's going to put in a lot of work, especially in the decks that are running a lot of instant and sorcery spells that are very swingy and impactful. I can definitely see why the price is up there on this card. Now let's talk about Voltorn Tyrant, and this card sees the price tag honestly because it fits perfectly in some of the most fun strategies, right? Power Matters is going to love this because what Power Matters strategies do 9 times out of 10, think about the Gitrog here, is they try to sacrifice very high power commanders or CMC creatures, sorry, not commanders, creatures, to generate a ton of value with like Ruthless Technomancer effects. Now, this guy not only gives you card advantage, but additionally, it's going to replace itself whenever it gets sacrificed. Now, this is going to mean that it's going to be very good in your Jund strategies where you can easily reanimate this guy, sacrifice this guy, reanimate this guy, because you're just going to be drawing a ton of cards when you do that and generating a massive army of 6/6s. So I can definitely see why this card's up there in price, and honestly it's just because it's going to be a blast to play with. I hope this video helped you guys out. Now maybe you can pick up some singles instead of buying a collector booster box in hopes that you pull one of these cards, even if you want to spring for one of the more expensive art cards that you want. If you want that very sexy Voltorn Tyrant, you can even buy that and still save a ton of money instead of buying a collector booster box. Now, I have a lot of fun opening packs, so I understand, but I just wanted to get this out there, maybe spread some awareness, share some cards that I think are going to be good, and I'm really curious about what you think about this video in the comments down below and what cards you're going to pick up from this set. With that being said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. I would like to thank my patrons, Newsome, Excessum, Prater, and Chicken Salad. You guys really helped me out. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.